55 miles per hour. You hit a bump, and suddenly your Jeep violently shakes, the steering wheel ripping away, the front end oscillating, and you cannot see. Death wobble. The dealer says replace tie rods and the steering damper and charges $1,800. 6 months later, it is back. Why? Dealers treat the symptoms, not the root cause. Today, we explain what actually causes it and the fix that saves $2,000 plus. A smooth highway between 45 and 65 miles per hour, and one bump is all it takes. The steering wheel snaps side to side so violently you can't hold it still. The entire front end shudders, headlights flicker, and for a few seconds you lose control. Vision blurs, and the Jeep feels like it is coming apart. This is the infamous death wobble, a sudden, violent oscillation in the front suspension and steering that only stops when you slow to a crawl. Drivers describe it as feeling like the wheels are about to rip off. The shaking starts when a front tire hits a pothole, an expansion joint, or a rough patch at speed. It is not a subtle problem. If you have felt it, you know. The sensation is unmistakable. The steering wheel jerks rapidly, the dash rattles, and the front axle seems to have a mind of its own. Some owners pull over, convinced they have blown a tire or snapped a suspension part. Others white-knuckle it to the shoulder, heart pounding. Death wobble is not unique to one year or model. It is most common on solid-axle Jeeps, especially the Wrangler JK, built from 2007 to 2018. But it is also seen on TJ, JL, and even XJ Cherokees. Any Jeep with a solid front axle and track bar can experience it, though lifted or high-mileage vehicles are at greater risk. The frequency is high enough that thousands of complaints have been filed with the NAHTSA, and Jeep forums are filled with stories from owners who have faced it more than once. If your Jeep has ever felt like it is trying to throw you off the road after a bump, you are not alone. Death wobble is a real, well-documented problem, and it is not just a quirk of off-road life. In the next moments, we will break down exactly what it is, why it happens, and which Jeeps are in the danger zone. A pattern emerges every time a Jeep owner brings in a Wrangler with death wobble. Service advisors follow a checklist that looks scientific on paper, inspect tires, check pressure, test drive, then move down the line, replace the steering damper, swap out tie rods, maybe throw in new ball joints and finish with an alignment. The process is almost automatic, and the invoices pile up. But for many, the shaking returns, sometimes days later after thousands of dollars have been spent. Average forum surveys and invoice reviews show owners typically overspend by $2,140 before finding relief. The so-called fix is rarely permanent. Instead, the same cycle repeats. New damper, new tie rods, another alignment, another bill. One whistleblower, a former Jeep technician with 8 years in the service bay, put it bluntly. The diagnostic flowchart never mentions the track bar torque. We are told to replace whatever the OEM recommends first. Most of the time, it is not the root cause. This is not just a few unlucky cases. Polls on Jeep forums reveal that more than 2/3 of owners had at least one dealer visit that failed to solve the wobble. Many report multiple trips, each time with a new part and a fresh charge. The core issue, play in the track bar assembly, remains untouched. The financial impact adds up fast. Multiply that $2,140 average across the thousands who have faced death wobble, and the wasted dollars reach into the hundreds of millions. The real cost is not just money, but trust. Owners leave with lighter wallets and the same fear on the highway. Meanwhile, the actual trigger for death wobble sits ignored, waiting to strike again. Every Wrangler, TJ, JL, or XJ with a solid front axle depends on one part to keep its wheels pointed straight: the track bar. This heavy steel bar runs laterally from the frame to the axle, locking the axle in place and preventing it from sliding side to side. When you hit a bump at speed, the track bar absorbs the sudden force and keeps the Jeep tracking straight, unless there is even the slightest play where it mounts. Engineers studying death wobble have zeroed in on this point. The bushings at each end of the track bar are designed to flex just enough for suspension movement, but not enough to allow the axle to shift. Over time, those bushings wear, or the bolts securing the bar lose torque. The difference can be measured with a feeler gauge. New bushings allow almost no movement, less than 0.02 millimeters. Once that play grows past half a millimeter, the entire dynamic changes. Now, when a wheel hits a bump, the axle can jolt sideways, pivoting on that loose bushing or bolt. That tiny motion does not just stay local, it sets off a chain reaction. The solid axle's mass and the short wheelbase of a Wrangler mean any side-to-side movement gets translated through the steering linkage in milliseconds. The result is a rapid, repeating oscillation, a harmonic wobble that amplifies with every bounce. Lab tests have shown that even 0.5 millimeters of track bar play is enough to trigger this effect at highway speeds. In fact, in controlled experiments, simply loosening the track bar bolt by a few foot-pounds was enough to induce full-blown death wobble in rigs that were otherwise perfectly aligned and balanced. Mechanics with years of front-end experience will tell you they can spot a death wobble case just by grabbing the track bar and feeling for that telltale clunk. One engineer put it this way: if you can see or feel any movement at the track bar mount, frame or axle side, you've found your smoking gun. And here is the number that shocks most owners. In community polls and shop records, tightening or replacing a loose track bar bolt resolves the wobble in about 40% of cases. That's before spending a dime on tie rods, dampers, or ball joints. The data is clear. When the track bar is solid, the system stays stable. When it is not, the oscillation can start with almost no warning. This is the root cause that slips past most dealership checklists and why so many repairs fail. It is not about how fancy the parts are or how new the tires look. It is about the physics of one small amount of play, multiplied by the forces of a Jeep at speed. The amplifiers, worn ball joints, bearings, or control arm bushings only come into play after the initial trigger is set. But the first and most common culprit is the track bar, and the proof is in both the lab data and thousands of owner stories. A single loose track bar bolt is enough to start the wobble, but it is rarely the only thing at play. Once the axle begins to move side to side, every worn or loose part in the front end acts as an amplifier. These amplifiers do not cause death wobble on their own, but they make it easier to trigger and much harder to stop. Start with the ball joints. These connect the steering knuckles to the axle, allowing the wheels to pivot when you turn. Over time, the ball joints develop play, sometimes just a fraction of a millimeter. That tiny looseness means the wheels can wobble independently, feeding extra movement into the steering system. Next are the tie rods and drag link. These rods transfer your steering input from the wheel to the tires. If the ends are worn out or the joints have slack, they will not hold alignment under stress. The result is a steering wheel that shakes even more violently as the axle starts to oscillate. Wheel bearings can also become amplifiers. When they are tight, the wheels spin smoothly, but as they wear, they allow the hub to move up and down or side to side. This movement adds another layer of instability, especially at highway speeds. Control arm bushings are another weak point. These rubber mounts let the axle move up and down with the suspension, but are supposed to keep it locked in place front to back. As the bushings wear or crack, the axle can shift under load, adding to the chaos when the wobble starts. Even the coil springs and shocks, if worn or mismatched, can contribute by failing to absorb and dampen the oscillation quickly enough. At the end of the list sits the steering damper. This part is often the first thing replaced by dealerships. It is a horizontal shock absorber that mounts to the tie rod or axle, designed to reduce steering vibrations. But here is the truth. The steering damper is not a cure. It only masks the symptoms by dulling the movement at the steering wheel. If the root cause, a loose track bar or worn bushings, remains, the wobble will always come back. Replacing the damper might buy a few quiet miles, but it never solves the underlying problem. Lab tests and real-world repairs show the same pattern. Address the amplifiers only after fixing the trigger. If the track bar is solid, worn ball joints or tie rods might cause a bit of wander, but they will not unleash the full-blown death wobble. If you skip the track bar and only replace amplifiers, you are just stacking up bills while the real threat stays in place. This is why so many Jeep owners spend thousands chasing a fix, only to have the problem return. The amplifiers make the wobble worse, but they do not start it. The only permanent solution begins with the track bar, and only then do the amplifiers deserve attention. A basic set of tools and a few minutes in your driveway are all it takes to uncover the real cause of death wobble. Start with a flashlight, a breaker bar or long-handled ratchet, a pry bar, and a friend if possible. No need for a lift or fancy shop equipment, just park on level ground, set the parking brake, and chock the rear wheels for safety. Begin at the heart of the issue, the track bar. With the engine off, crouch at the front bumper and locate the heavy steel bar running from the frame to the axle. Ask your helper to rock the steering wheel left and right while you watch both ends of the track bar. You are looking for any side-to-side movement at the bushings or brackets. Just a hair of play is enough. If you see the bar shift before the wheels begin to turn, or if you hear a faint clunk, that is a red flag. Next, grab the track bar mid-span and try to force it up, down, and side to side by hand. Even the smallest movement can set off the wobble at speed. Move on to the tie rods and drag link. Grasp each rod near the ends and twist or push to feel for looseness. Check ball joints by jacking up one front tire and rocking it at the 12 and 6 o'clock positions. Any free play means wear. Do not forget the control arm bushings. Look for cracks, dry rot, or movement as the axle is rocked. Finally, spin each front wheel and listen for grinding or wobbling in the hub, a sign of a worn bearing. Each step is simple, but together they expose the weak links that dealers often overlook. If you find play in the track bar or any of these joints, you are already ahead of the standard service checklist. Permanent fixes for death wobble start with precise, measurable action. The first step is tightening the track bar bolts to the exact factory specifications. For most Wranglers, that means 125 foot-pounds on the frame side bolt and 275 foot-pounds on the axle side. These are not just numbers. They are the difference between a stable Jeep and one that could throw you into a violent shake at highway speed. Independent shop owners and experienced Jeep techs agree, a digital torque wrench, not a guess, is the only way to get this right. If the bushings at either end of the track bar show any cracks, oil seepage, or more than 0.3 millimeters of movement, replacement is mandatory. The go-to solution in the Jeep world is the Synergy dual durometer bushing, part number 4323-1. This specific bushing is engineered to handle the side loads that trigger wobble, and it fits JK, JKU, and XJ models using a 9/16 of an inch bolt and 1 7/8 inches by 0.188 inches for the shell. Some shops also use the Curry anti-rock Delrin bushing, part number CE99004. But the Synergy part is the most widely stocked and proven for this fix. Once the bushings are installed and the bolts torqued, a full alignment must follow. Correct caster, camber, and toe settings ensure the new parts are not fighting old geometry. Shops that follow this order, torque, replace, align, report a verified fix rate above 90% for track bar-induced wobble. The cost for this repair, including the bushing kit and labor, typically ranges from $450 to $650 at a reputable independent shop. This is the mechanical remedy that ends the cycle of symptom chasing and finally puts the problem to rest. A real invoice tells the whole story. One Jeep owner brought his 2012 Wrangler JK to the dealer for death wobble. The bill listed a new steering damper, tie rods, and an alignment, $2,600 paid in full. But the shaking returned within weeks. Frustrated, the owner found an independent shop specializing in solid axle Jeeps. Their approach was different. Start with the track bar. Check the bushings and torque the bolts to specification. The fix was a Synergy dual durometer bushing kit and precise bolt tightening, plus a fresh alignment. The total was $450, parts and labor included. That is more than 70% less than the dealer's bill, and the wobble never came back. This is not a one-off case. Side-by-side invoice snapshots show the pattern. Dealer repairs stack up with parts that do not solve the problem, while targeted fixes zero in on the real cause and cost a fraction. The numbers speak for themselves. For every $2,600 spent chasing symptoms, a $450 repair gets to the root and ends the cycle. The savings are not just dollars. They are peace of mind and confidence behind the wheel. When the right part is fixed first, the problem stays gone. Routine maintenance is the single most effective way to keep death wobble from coming back. The foundation is simple. Every 12,000 miles, or once a year, grab a torque wrench and check the track bar bolts. The frame side bolt should be tightened to 125 foot-pounds, and the axle side bolt to 275 foot-pounds. This quick step catches the most common trigger before it ever becomes a problem. For higher mileage Jeeps, or those that see rough trails or winter road salt, make it a habit to inspect the track bar bushings every 30,000 miles. Look for any cracks, dry rot, or oil seepage. If a bushing feels soft, moves more than 0.3 millimeters, or shows visible wear, swap it out for a dual durometer replacement. These upgraded bushings last longer and resist the side loads that start the wobble in the first place. Every 6,000 miles, check your alignment, especially after hitting a big pothole or after adding a suspension lift. Keep an eye on ball joints, tie rods, and control arm bushings at every oil change. Quick visual checks for torn boots, grease leaks, or looseness can catch issues before they grow. By sticking to this checklist, you turn a Jeep from a wobble risk into a reliable daily driver. Owners who follow these intervals report years of trouble-free driving, even with bigger tires and off-road upgrades. A 2013 Wrangler owner from Ohio had spent nearly $2,000 at the dealership. The dealer installed new tie rods and an upgraded steering damper, and still the wobble came back on every highway trip. After reading a single forum post, he borrowed a torque wrench, checked the track bar bolts, and found the axle side loose by almost a quarter turn. One click to 275 foot-pounds and the Jeep ran smooth. 3 years later, not a hint of wobble. In Texas, a 2018 JL driver grew tired of repeat visits and mounting bills. She found a local off-road shop where the tech skipped the parts swap and went straight for the track bar bushings. The old rubber was cracked and soft. With a new Synergy dual durometer bushing and a fresh alignment, her Jeep went from barely drivable to rock solid, even after a weekend on the trails. A retired mechanic in California tackled his son's 2009 TJ after 2 failed dealer repairs. He started with the basics, grabbed the track bar, felt the telltale clunk, and swapped in a replacement bushing for under $50. The fix took an hour. The next road trip was smooth and steady, no drama, no return visits. These stories aren't rare, they are the new normal for owners who take diagnosis into their own hands. Right now, thousands of Jeep owners still trust costly repairs that miss the real cause. The truth is simple. Even a fraction of a millimeter of play in your track bar bushings can unleash chaos. Until the industry stops treating symptoms, the risk endures. Your steering, your safety. Demand real answers. Share your Jeep model and symptoms below to help others break the cycle.